Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic. Today we are going to cover everything you need to know before you see Avengers Age of Ultron. This video is meant for people that maybe don't remember or didn't see some of the movies. So if you're a diehard fan, you probably know this already, but this is for your friends that maybe don't. So let's dive in. So let's start way back during World War II. Yes, way back then. And yes, this is important. Both sides of the war were trying to go to ridiculous means to win the war. Germany was exploring paranormal means to win the war, which was actually the inception of an organization called Hydra, led by a guy named Red Skull who literally had a red skull. He sought to find an ancient artifact called the Tesseract. To combat this, the US was experimenting with creating a super soldier serum. They found the best candidate for the job in a young, scrawny guy named Steve Rogers. He won the heart of a woman named Peggy Carter and went in for his dose of super soldier serum. It basically transformed him into the best version of a man possible, with extra strength and agility and abs. Immediately after seeing this success, Hydra destroyed the machine and all of the remaining super soldier serum, so Rogers was the only one able to receive it. Rogers wanted to still fight the war, so he went off to Germany and fought the Red Skull alongside Peggy and the genius inventor Howard Stark. Stark's biggest contribution was the invention of a shield made of the rarest material on the planet, vibranium, which is able to basically absorb an infinite amount of force. Vibranium doesn't exist in our real world, but there it's super rare and found only in an African nation called Wakanda, which also doesn't exist in real life. To fight the Red Skull, Rogers even got to team up with his old buddy Bucky Barnes, but Bucky wasn't long for this world and he fell from a train into the icy depths of a mountainside. Rogers, now under the name Captain America, defeated the Red Skull and seemingly stopped Hydra. However, to do this, Steve must crash their ship into the ocean. They crashed, and Steve became frozen in the North Atlantic Ocean along with the powerful Tesseract. Now, Peggy loved Steve, and her heart was pretty broken after this. She worked with Howard Stark to continue battling the remnants of Hydra and other nefarious organizations. They would serve as a foundation for an organization later referred to as S.H.I.E.L.D., which is basically a hidden government unit dedicated to stopping seemingly impossible odds. They recruited former Hydra scientist Arnim Zola, who used to work for the Red Skull, but it turns out he was still loyal to Hydra and used S.H.I.E.L.D.'s resources to continue recruiting for the evil organization. Howard Stark grew older and became quite rich after inventing many new ways to wage war, making money from military contracts. He had one son named Tony, who grew up to inherit all of Howard's money, inventions, and reputation. It wasn't until Tony saw firsthand what his company was creating that he ultimately had a change of heart. There was an attack in Afghanistan while Tony was visiting and selling weapons. He was hit with a blast of shrapnel that began to slowly crawl its way towards his heart. A militant group called the Ten Rings captured Stark and wanted him to build weapons for them, but Stark and a new buddy of his named Yinsen instead used this equipment to 1. Build a magnet that would keep this shrapnel from his heart, and 2. Build a suit of armor that he could use to escape. Escape he did, though Yinsen didn't make it. Stark was rescued and brought back to the States, but his new perspective on the weapons he's been building made him shut down the weapons creation wing of his company, which was also the most profitable. He became obsessed with the technology he began utilizing in Afghanistan and wanted to use it to help others, creating the suit known as Iron Man. Now this caught the attention of S.H.I.E.L.D., who has been working in the shadows for many years now. The now director of S.H.I.E.L.D., named Nick Fury, approached Stark and asked him to become part of something called the Avengers Initiative, which was a name for a small, elite group of people who could help stop threats to the planet. Now, were there other people skilled enough to be part of this Avengers Initiative at this time? S.H.I.E.L.D. had a few extraordinary members on their team, such as the ex-Russian assassin Natasha Romanoff, codenamed the Black Widow, and Master Archer Clint Barton, codenamed Hawkeye. They also had their eyes on a scientist by the name of Bruce Banner, who was accidentally bombarded with gamma radiation and lived to tell about it. When Banner finds himself angry now, he transforms into a giant creature known as the Hulk, which has little control over its anger and may accidentally or even intentionally hurt people that Banner might consider friends. If used properly, though, the Hulk can be a valuable asset, as its strength and durability are nearly unlimited, so far anyways. Banner's hesitant to join S.H.I.E.L.D. as he knows it would put everyone's lives in danger and chooses to live a secluded and private life off the grid. Now we need to step back a bit, as some things are transpiring off of the planet. There are other planets, and one of them is called Asgard. These beings that live there, called Asgardians, can travel to other planets using something called the Bifrost Bridge, which is watched and guarded by the all-seeing Heimdall. A long time ago, Asgardians visited Earth, and the Scandinavian people they encountered saw them as gods, which created the Norse religion. Anyways, the ruler of these Asgardian people is Odin, the quote-unquote All-Father. He has 2 sons, Thor and Loki. Thor is the arrogant heir to the throne, relying on brute strength and his ability to conjure lightning. Loki wants the throne and relies on trickery, illusions, and magic. To get Thor out of the way, Loki tricks Odin into believing that Thor is on the verge of causing a war, and Odin banishes Thor to Midgard, aka Earth, to learn humility. The source of Thor's powers is Hammer Mjolnir, which can only be picked up by those deemed quote-unquote worthy. Thus Thor ends up on Earth and is unable to pick up his hammer. He meets Jane Foster, a scientist, and forms a budding romance. S.H.I.E.L.D. intercepts Thor for a bit and Agent Phil Coulson interrogates him. Long story short, Thor decides to help Earth defend itself and becomes worthy again, managing to gain all of his Asgardian powers back. We learn throughout this that Loki isn't even an Asgardian at all, as he's a species called a frost giant, but because he was so small, he was left for dead as a baby, and Odin saved his life and raised him as their own. Thor returns to Asgard and gets back in his father's good graces. Meanwhile, Stark has continued building equipment all this time and even built a suit for his buddy Jim Rhodes, who goes by the name War Machine. To make time for saving the world, he gave power of his company to his former assistant and now lover, Pepper Potts. None of them know that around this time S.H.I.E.L.D. has discovered the downed airship, which contains not only the Tesseract, but also the frozen body of Steve Rogers, aka Captain America. Rogers is awoken in New York and realizes that everyone he cared about is dead or on the verge of death. He agrees to work with S.H.I.E.L.D. for now as he tries to find a new purpose. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. is experimenting with the Tesseract, unsure what it really does. Then out of nowhere, Loki appears on Earth and takes it. It turns out he's been serving an intergalactic tyrant named Thanos, who wants the Tesseract but will let Loki use it to enslave the Earth first. Win-win for both of them. Along with the Tesseract, Loki has a staff which enables him to mind control others. Loki's going to use the Tesseract to bring this alien army to Earth, so to stop him, Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. invoke the Avengers Initiative, which includes Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, Steve Rogers, and the S.H.I.E.L.D. power duo of Hawkeye and Black Widow. They not only have to work together to stop Loki, but they even fight amongst themselves. The Unstoppable Hulk rampages on the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier, Stark and Thor battle over how to proceed with Loki, yet it all hits home when Loki murders Agent Phil Coulson, who idolizes Steve Rogers and everything these heroes were doing. What we didn't know at the time was that Nick Fury managed to save Coulson's life by injecting him with an alien blood from a race known as the Kree. The Avengers rallied after Coulson's supposed death and managed to save New York from catastrophe. Thor returned to Asgard with Loki in chains and the Tesseract, where it could be kept safe. After this battle, Tony Stark was pretty rattled after facing off against an alien horde. He began to create mindless Iron Man suits that could be remote controlled, but there were definitely glitches in this system. We see him eventually destroy all of those suits that he created, as well as getting the shrapnel permanently removed from his chest, so that the reactor magnet was no longer necessary. Him and Pepper hope to live a happy life together. Back on Asgard, Thor encountered a villain named Malekith, who used an object known as the Ether to cause destruction on Earth, as well as other planets. In order to defeat him, Thor had to let his traitor brother Loki free so they could work together. Loki was killed by one of Malekith's lieutenants while Thor saved the day. As the audience, though, we see that Loki is indeed still alive, and actually begins to impersonate the Allfather Odin. What happened to the real Odin? We don't know. Two of Thor's fellow Asgardians take the Ether to a being called the Collector, and it turns out that both of these items are things called Infinity Stones, and they should not be kept together. Now, while most everyone parted ways after the Battle of New York, Steve Rogers had nowhere to go, so he stayed and worked with S.H.I.E.L.D. alongside Black Widow. A strange assassin named the Winter Soldier arrives on the scene, and it turns out that it's his old friend Bucky Barnes, who has been mind-controlled and used by what's left of Hydra. The conspiracy unfolds even more, and Rogers finds out that Hydra has infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D. to the very top. He recruits a guy named Sam Wilson, codenamed the Falcon, to aid Black Widow and himself as they take down the now corrupt S.H.I.E.L.D. The Winter Soldier doesn't remember his life as Bucky Barnes, but remembers flashes of Steve Rogers, enough to not kill him. Falcon and Rogers decide to try and find Bucky and remind him of who he really is. Nick Fury fakes his own death and goes into hiding, while his second-in-command, Maria Hill, also leaves S.H.I.E.L.D. There's a small splinter group of S.H.I.E.L.D. that still remains, ran by the now back-to-life Phil Coulson, but they lack all the resources that the larger organization had. We also see here that Hydra has claimed the scepter of Loki and is somehow experimenting on people with powers called miracles. Now we cut back to outer space, where the tyrant Thanos is upset that he doesn't have the Tesseract. He does, however, find another Infinity Gem, but his lieutenant Ronan takes it for himself. Ronan is defeated by a small group of anti-heroes known as the Guardians of the Galaxy. The Collector's base is destroyed, and it's unsure if the Aether is still there, while the Purple Stone is now in protective custody by a group called the Nova Corps. And that brings us up to Avengers Age of Ultron, in theaters May 1st, where Banner and Stark have created an artificial intelligence that may be able to protect the planet without people like the Avengers. Things obviously go awry when this intelligence becomes sentient and a threat that only the Avengers can hope to stop. And thanks for watching. Make sure you check out our official Facebook page at facebook.com/IAYTD. Subscribe, like, all that jazz, and hopefully you enjoy Avengers Age of Ultron.